Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. We're so excited to have you here with us today. Please, as you join, let us know what interested you in the topic. We'll be checking the chat throughout the conversation for questions, and we'll be kicking it off in just a minute. But please just let us know where you're joining from, anything you'd like us to know about yourself, or any questions you have about the topic, and we'll kick it off in just a second. I'm seeing great things in the chat. We have someone from Costa Rica. We have Elizabeth City State. Yes, wow, Costa Rica, yes. We also have Bowie State, Waldorf, Webster, great. And folks joining from Baltimore, Maryland as well, awesome. Orlando, Florida. More deltas. Okay, good. We're keeping it balanced.
I'll switch places with someone in Costa Rica.
Right. Yes, we'll all go. I have spent time in Costa Rica, Pura Vida.
Vida Asana. That's where I've been. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Well, we are 2 minutes in, and I want to make sure we maximize the time, having as much time as possible in the conversation. So I want to go ahead and kick us off and get started. I'm so excited to be with you all here today. We're talking today about influence and persuasion and what's needed to activate your network. It's always a good time to talk more about your internal and external influence and how you can raise the bar there. So we have a great conversation ahead. As you may know from attending a previous C-Suite Coach chat, these are free developmental opportunities that we put on every month, and we do it with an industry leader, an expert, and our C-Suite coaches. So you can also hear how an executive coach thinks about these topics. I want to highlight for you all that we still have opportunities available for you to purchase coaching packages if that's something that's available to you, interesting to you, on our website. So please be sure to check those out. We have great packages. And if you're interested in having your whole team experience executive coaching, you definitely want to reach out to us so we can set up an enterprise deal for you all. But again, really excited to be here today. All of our C-Suite Coach chats have been really amazing. And today I'm excited about this topic in particular and this event because I should introduce myself, Angelina Darasaw, the founder and CEO of C-Suite Coach. I always am so engaged in these conversations, and I rarely have the opportunity to take notes because I'm moderating. But today we have a treat for you where we'll also have one of our C-Suite coaches moderate the conversation. So I will be able to rapidly take notes and enjoy the conversation. So that being said, we want to go ahead and introduce our panelists and dive in. And I will begin by introducing Sandra Garcia, who is an ICF certified coach, a marketing and branding strategist, as well as a DEI consultant. And so she has worked with a number of companies and strategized for brands such as Toyota, L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, Apple, Verizon, Sephora. She currently serves as a Google digital coach for New York City. And in this work, she coaches Black and Latinx business owners on digital skills they need to grow their businesses. She prides herself on being the coach that helps individuals realize, get to their maximum potential and have moments of realization and to be enlightened about what works best for them. I'd also just like to call out that Sandra Garcia is as well a C-Suite Coach network coach, and packages for coaching with her are available on our site. Next, I'd like to introduce the moderator of this chat who has been with us before. You want to make sure you check out our YouTube channel and see our previous chats. And here we have Dr. Trenace Richardson, who brings over 20 years of experience in organizational development, public speaking, leadership development, and executive coaching for hundreds of individuals and several organizations, including the links, Jack and Jill, Delta Sigma Theta sorority. I know we have some Deltas in the room, including Jackie Carter on the C-suite coach team, the George Washington University American Council on Education. I could go on and on. She holds a doctorate from George Washington University in Higher Education Administration, a master's in religious studies from Howard University School of Divinity, and a bachelor's in secondary education and English from Elizabeth City State University. So also shout out to the HBCUs. And I also would like to acknowledge that Dr. Trinace is as well a C-suite coach, network coach. So make sure you check out her bio on our site. And last, but certainly not least, we have an industry leader, a thought leader, and an expert in many things joining us today as well. And that is Trish Smith, who is a diversity and inclusion champion, a communications expert, a public relations veteran. And these are just some of the words that can describe her work. With her extensive tenure with Edelman, the world's leading global communications marketing agency, Trish Smith has managed stakeholder outreach, strategic positioning, crisis and reputation management campaigns for a host of Fortune 500 companies. And additionally, for a decade, Smith led the firm's award-winning multicultural practice, providing senior counsel to a wide range of clients to protect, promote, and evolve their brands effectively, engaging diverse thought leaders. I could go on and on about her accolades, but I'll call out just a few. Several awards, including being one of the top 100 most influential Blacks in corporate America, most influential women in corporate America in Savoy magazine. And in 2019, she received the AdColor Champions Award for her work in diversity and inclusion. So lots to talk about when we think about these themes like influence and activating a network. The women we have in the room today are truly ones who have done it, and that has definitely led to some of these amazing accomplishments that I've been able to speak about. So without further ado, I want to acknowledge these ladies. Hello, and kick it over to Dr. Trinace to facilitate a conversation with you all. I will be taking notes and seeing you all in the chat.
I'm so excited for you, Angelina. Thank you. Thank you so much for the gracious introduction, and hello to everyone. It is so exciting to be here with you all for this hour of really invigorating discussion on influence and persuasion. And I'm reminded of John Maxwell, who says leadership is influence. And so we might be able to talk about a lot of things related to our professional careers, but if we don't talk about influence and persuasion, I believe we're missing something. So we're going to jump into the conversation with Sandra and Trish. We want you to send us your questions. So if you have them already burning inside of you, begin to post them, because after just a few questions back and forth with our panelists, our guests, we're going to jump into your questions. Would really love for you to begin to post those so that we can have a conversation with you. And so I will just start. I think we probably want to start with maybe some idea about what influence and persuasion are, and maybe the difference between them. We probably come to the table with our own ideas of what they are. And so maybe both of you could answer this for me. Trish, maybe if you could start. Welcome to the forum. And maybe if you could give us an idea in your mind of what influence and persuasion are, and if there is a difference between them.
Sure thing. Firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity, Angelina. Thank you for the forum. Trinace, we go way back, so thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you today as you're moderating the conversation. So it's funny because when I saw the title, I had to sit and think about it for a moment, to be quite honest, to really think about influence and persuasion. How are they connected? What do they mean? We know there's power in words, and so many times words are nuanced in terms of their difference. So I had to think about it. And I did initially think of a negative connotation, which I know we can talk about later. We often think of persuasion as this bad word, that it can be manipulative or that it can be deceptive in some way. But I do believe, as you just mentioned, that everyone has a sphere of influence, that all of us have a space and a place and an opportunity to influence, whether you're a part of a team, an organization, a sorority, whatever you are a part of, you can influence your family. you have an ability to influence. So influence is the ability to affect change, right? It is to cause an outcome, an impact, for you to use who and what you are, what you do to influence. Persuasion is helpful in exerting that influence, right? It is helpful. It is almost somewhat of the fuel that sort of, or a lever that you pull to keep the car in motion. You have to use persuasion to affect or to impact influence. And persuasion, of course, can take many shapes and forms. And I know we'll get into the tactics around persuasion, but for me, that is the distinction between, or the connection and synergy between persuasion and influence.
Oh, that's so good. I'm ready to jump in, but Sandra, add some meat to that. What would you say about the two?
Oh yeah, I would agree. They're very different, very similar, and definitely impacts one another. And the first thing that came to mind was that Trish said there's power in words. I would say there's power in presence. Your presence speaks before we even open up our mouths to say absolutely anything. And also, we know that by just showing up in just a few seconds, people sometimes make the decision as to whether they will listen to you. And that is influence. So I would say it begins with your presence.
That's so good. Presence and words. And I think about, you mentioned, Trish, the car. And if influence is where I want to be, I want to have influence and to grow and increase my influence. Persuasion is definitely that vehicle that can get me there. And I also think about it as currency. You know, influence is currency, and the way in which we spend that currency and really just have the opportunity to influence others, to impact others and affect change. We use persuasion to do that. So thank you for that distinction. And I'll just go there because you mentioned it, Trish. I think it's important to note that some of us may have a negative connotation of what persuasion and influence are. And we think about manipulation. There's an instructor, Scott Tuning, who says that manipulation is the opposite of persuasion, in his opinion. It's inappropriate because unlike persuasion, it uses twisted facts or deception. I want you to just jump in. What is that negative connotation that we have about persuasion? Why do we have it? And how can we combat that? What ways in which can we approach persuasion so that it doesn't feel like it's this negative, daunting thing?
I think it's probably gotten a bad rap because of how we've seen it used in the past. We think of sort of used car salesmen or salespersons trying to sell you something, trying to persuade you, or a financer trying to get you to take on some loan. You think of being persuaded into something that may not be in your best interest and for your best good. So I think that's oftentimes why we may have that thought in terms of the word and the framing itself. But I also think that persuasion can be, it's all about how you use it, right? And what it's used for. And that for me is a distinction. I think that if it's about what your end goal is and the tactics you use, that can be deceptive or manipulative. If you're doing something covert or not being completely honest and upfront, right? Or if you have an ulterior motive underneath what you're really getting to, or you're at least professing that you're trying to work towards, that to me is when it becomes something else and not something about greater good, larger impact, reciprocity, right? So I think those are some of the reasons why it gets that bad rap, why we have that negative connotation, and where the distinction or difference lies in terms of how you or what you're using the persuasion to do and what the final outcome is.
Oh, that's so good. The words that came to mind was motivation and intention, right? What is our motivation behind what we are doing, what we're saying, where we're trying to draw people? And I believe that the smartest, most emotionally intelligent people in the room can smell our motivation and our intention and our inauthenticity and self-serving agendas. And so
that's it. You can smell it. I was at this conference, I'm sorry to jump in, about a month ago in France, the International Women's Forum, and someone said you can read the air. You can read the air, right? You can smell it. You can read the air, what's happening and what the interaction really is about, what's underneath the surface, what's not being said that's speaking volumes.
That's so good. So good. Sandra, checking in. Anything you want to share about this one? The negativity that's behind it, that's perceived behind it?
Yeah. So I would say part of that negative tone may be because persuasion it requires somewhat convincing or educating, informing. And sometimes it may be on a thought we may not have, or it may be around something that we have a different perspective or opinion around. And because of that, it can seem negative. Now, I have a sales background. I'm a corporate baby, then dropped out of corporate, but I started out in sales. And that is something that we used pretty often, persuasion, but really to inform and to educate. But it was a tool. And it was an active skill that we used. But I would actually also say that we're all salespeople. Because since we already acknowledge that influence starts with your presence, we're constantly showing up. So we're constantly selling ourselves. And so we're constantly actively always looking to get buy-in also. So we're salespeople. So persuasion is actually really critical and important for absolutely all of us.
That's so good. The idea that we either do it well or we shy away from it. We back away from the opportunities that we have to persuade and influence, but we all have them in front of us. And so I'd love for you to speak a little bit more about that, because there may be some folks on who saw the words influence and persuasion and they thought, I'm coming on because that's not me. I don't have the skills. I don't have the power of influence. That's not me in the room. And I do maybe recognize the need for that in the workplace. And I've seen people activate theirs and take advantage of theirs. What advice would you give to someone who wants to increase, up-level their influence and persuasion? And who wants to, Sandra, go for it.
Yeah, I can jump in and say we all have influence, and it's working. It might be working loudly or silently, but we're all influencing people somehow, and especially in the workplace. One of the first things is just the thought that people may have of us. So it's important to be intentional. But I would say for those who think that they may not have power or influence, you do. Then the second thing would be to become self-aware, know where you actually are so we can see what we need to work on. And also it's active, it's a soft skill, not a hard skill. And like all skills, it does require work. Another thing that I would say is that confidence is a big part of it also. And to be honest, it took me time in the workplace to develop that confidence, to be able to also fuel, going back to the analogies we were using in the very beginning, to power persuasion and to also take ownership of the influence and then also become aware of how I want it to be influential.
That's good. Trish, before
I just, Sandra said so much that it's so good there. I would just say it is like a muscle that you have to work. You have to exercise it. As in anything, you have to do it more often, become more comfortable with it and in doing it. And some of the key things are, I think, being prepared, right? The more you prepare, the more comfortable you'll be and you'll feel in making your case, if you will, in articulating your perspective and position. So being prepared about the subject matter, the topic in which you're trying to persuade someone, about that individual, because every person has different motivations, right? That what a pitch may not work for one person, but could work for a next, and so on and so on. So understand that person. What are the levers you need to pull with and for them? Is it about money? Is it about innovation? Is it about effectiveness, efficiency? What is the lever that will work with them to persuade them effectively? So being knowledgeable and preparing in advance will make you much more comfortable. We talked before as well about communicating clearly and often. right, is so that you can effectively present what you're trying to convey in a way that someone grasps it, that it reaches and resonates with them. You're speaking their language. How many times have we been making a case and we're using jargon or we're using terms that the other person doesn't grasp? If you're not speaking their language, they won't hear you. You'll never get to a place of persuasion and therefore exert influence if you're not communicating effectively. So I would say doing it often so you become more comfortable, like you do anything that you want to learn and strengthen, and then also preparing and communicating in a way that people can grasp and understand.
Yeah. I would like to add just one more thing, if I can. So one, I love that. I add it into the chat. It's a muscle. And I am really slacking with my exercise these days, but absolutely it's something that you learn. You must exercise it in order to execute and execute often to practice. The other thing in terms of executing, I would say, especially if you think you don't have it, that means you're probably coping with what you believe you don't have. And I would say I love to share with folks practice preparedness mechanisms versus coping mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that self-awareness is, where are you? What does the environment call for? What do the people that you're interacting with or looking to influence, how can they be influenced, so that you can prepare, so that you can practice beforehand, and use those mechanisms versus coping later on.
Oh, this is so good. I love all of what you share so far, and it's really getting us into some very practical ways that we can practice and build this muscle that you're talking about. Sandra's been in sales, Trish is in marketing. I'm a researcher at heart, and so I'm thinking there's this research, this recon that has to be done, getting to know ourselves really well, getting to know who we are pitching to, who we are talking to in our professional lives, as well as, like you said, the environment and what the needs are of the organization as a whole. And I believe that takes listening. We are going to have to be great listeners so that we can get active listeners, so that we can gather recon information to utilize when it's time to communicate. I love that in the chat, Angelina asked, does anyone in the room have challenges influencing stakeholders in their professional lives? And we got some resounding yeses. So I'm asking both of you all, what have your challenges been when it comes to influencing your stakeholders in the work that you do? You have to do that all the time. And so how can you help us overcome when influence and persuasion is challenging? What do we need to put into play?
Yeah, it's interesting. Someone posted the point about vulnerability, and I think that is key for me, or has been, right? Being vulnerable in a situation, in that we have to recognize, as we are actively persuading and looking to influence, we may not always get the yes we're looking for, and it can make us a little gun shy. It can make us a little nervous and worried and anxious. And so being open to that, being open to the fact that you may not get that yes that time, or someone may not buy into your vision or idea at that moment. But the other key tool here to remember and step to take is to not give up. If you have a vision, if you have an idea, if you have a perspective, you have something to offer to the group, organization, team, what have you, then to be consistent in that and to continue to follow up. So, okay, it didn't work this time. Let me go back and perfect this a bit more. How may I need to reconfigure my approach, right? And the information I presented and how I presented it, and maybe even to whom. So to reconsider those things and go back at it again. So being vulnerable, I think oftentimes the fear of a no can paralyze us, not just in the workplace. That's another conversation for another platform that Angelina can set up. But in life, right, the fear of the no can stop us in our tracks and prevent us from really being effective in influencing. So I would say the vulnerability piece has been one for me. And I think, again, it's just doing it again and again, and recognizing that if you don't use your voice in a situation, in a moment, in a project, whatever is going on, if you don't use your voice, there is something that's going unsaid, right? We are all uniquely gifted to do something and to make a mark somewhere. So there's something that goes unsaid and something that's undone if you don't do it. And so it's bigger than you even, right? So we have to recognize that and really look within and find that courage to continue, even if we get the no once, twice, 3 times, to continue to go back at it.
Before Sandra jumps in, the word, I was waiting for you to use it because everything you said resonated with courage with me. And it's one of the pillars I use in sharing with coaching clients, because to me, courage is valuing the possible outcome more than what it takes to get to it. And so we get past ourselves because we recognize that the possible outcome, yes, we may get a no, but it's also possible we get a yes. And it's also possible that we change our organization or our environment, or we help someone on the other end of that. And I value that possible outcome more than the anxiety that someone mentioned, or the issues that I have with speaking up. I love that. Courage is so important, and tied right into that is vulnerability. Sandra, you look like you're ready.
Oh yeah, I was reading the chat. I was like having thoughts of me in the past. Again, I'm a corporate dropout. I dropped out for a reason, but now I love that I'm able to work with organizations and people within organizations in order to avoid just that, unless it's for you. So yes, I had challenges myself, many challenges. First and foremost, language. My first language is Spanish. I learned to speak English. I know that's a surprise now. But also just being able to articulate thoughts and that cultural difference as well. Someone mentioned not being able to communicate the vision. Sometimes we really do just speak different languages, right? So I think it requires definitely learning, knowing your environment, and then preparing. And then being consistent with self first, and then being consistent with what you're trying to communicate if it really matters to you. So 1, don't give up on yourself, be consistent there. And then 2, be consistent with what you're communicating. And because I love talking about personal branding, we're all chief marketing officers and CEO of ourselves. So we must make sure that what matters to us is really what matters. And then that means we won't give up on it. But I must also say in the workplace that if we are being consistent in selling ourselves, selling a vision, selling a thought, an idea, and we're not being supported, that is a message within itself. So take that influence, take that persuasion, and take those skills to a place where all of that beauty and all of those skills can be appreciated. So also don't wear yourself out selling yourself in a place that is not buying. That's also important. Okay, I could keep going. So
you could keep going. You really could. The idea, and we go back to my analogy that if influence is currency, and you are wisely making deposits, and you are building relationships and making connections and doing research and all of the things that you need to do, and you recognize that there's no reciprocity there. Whoa, that's really big, Sandra. I want to just go there with both of you. Someone has mentioned there are 6 principles of persuasion, and you've touched on so many of them. One was consistency, right? Just really being consistent as it relates to who we are in our professional space, knowing ourselves, representing ourselves with our best work. Trish mentioned being prepared. You just mentioned reciprocity, really just expecting that not only do I give, but I should, expect to receive as well. Some others that have been mentioned are authority, just recognizing that every influential person is not someone with the title necessarily, but we do recognize those who hold the titles. There are so many principles involved. Empathy, you've mentioned vulnerability. Could you speak to what, if you had to say what is key And maybe you have said it already, but what is key as it relates to persuasion? If someone wants to walk away and say, I need to build this muscle as it relates to persuasion, what would you say that would be? Anything come to mind?
So I thought about this. For me, consistency is key. And that's for myself, as well as when I look to others in terms of those persons influencing me, right? If you're here one day and there the next, up one day, down the next, there's no consistency. I can't trust what you're then trying to sell me, what you're trying to influence me or persuade me to think, believe, or do, right? So for me, consistency has to be key, that there is a demonstrated practice of being consistent, of knowing your stuff, of really being present, being engaged, being dependable. Consistency is paramount in my mind.
So good. Thank you for that, Trish, and thank you for whoever needed. I appreciate that. Sandra, is there one of those principles or something else come to mind for you?
Yeah, Trish actually just hit on it. I was thinking trust. So we're all consumers and we're all salespeople, right? So if you're selling me something, including yourself, and I'm not buying it because I don't trust it, it's not believable, we have to work on that too. So how reliable are you? How trustworthy are you? Can I believe that what you're telling me is true? Also, from a consistency perspective, will other people have the same shared experience with you? Word of mouth marketing is huge. And it is a form of marketing that will never go away, even in the digital space. People will talk, we read reviews. So what are people saying? Can I trust you? Also, if you say you are selling a product or self that can do this, I can do this for you, I'm ready to do this, are you showing up as if you are ready? And are you reliable? Are things being delivered when you say they will be delivered? And if not, are you communicating effectively to let people know what to expect?
So good. So
If
good.
I could, Trinace, could
Please.
I just, because I can't believe you mentioned trust, and my CEO would be so angry. We're supposed to be the house of trust, that we do an annual trust barometer. This is the 22nd year we've done it, and it looks at trust across institutions, so government, business, nonprofits, and media. But what it looks at is like the root, what trust then produces or prevents. And to your point, you can do nothing with anyone in any situation if you don't trust them, right? To have an effective relationship in terms of your work together, your ability to be able to produce something or do something. And so trust really is so critically important. We know people make decisions about where they'll work, about products they'll buy, right? Brands they'll support based upon the level of trust that they have in them. So I think trust is critically important as well, Sandra. That's such a great call out.
So good. Consistency and trust, you all. There's so many things we have discussed and will continue to discuss, but those sound like really important principles. And I think we should probably just point out for someone who we started this talking about, maybe the negative connotation that influence and persuasion has, but we can all see with our own eyes. We have folks that we admire, folks that we consider mentors. Both Sandra and I are network coaches, and we are here to support you. So some folks have gotten to the place in their lives where they are experienced enough to share wisdom and knowledge. And all of that is because of influence and persuasion, the opportunities to be able to pour into other people. And so I'd love for you all to just talk about some of the benefits, why we should jump into this. To me, it has clear value, but because it is seen negatively by some, when you are an influential person, when you have the ability to persuade, you get more done, you advance the projects that you care about. Could you talk a little bit more about what you're able to do and accomplish for yourself, for your organization, for others when you are influential and persuasive?
Mm-hmm. Sandra, you want to go first?
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. Go ahead. So for me, it's been interesting because I've been with my firm for many years. I like to say I started when I was 12, but for for 20 years, so shortly after grad school, and I've had many roles. And two of the roles were roles that didn't exist. So I'm our first Global Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. And the desire to have that role was because I didn't see people like myself growing up in agency. So I wanted to create more space and place for individuals who look like me. And when I think about I actually said, we need to create this role. I kept saying, I'm happy to help. And so when the opportunity presented itself, they said, okay, well, are you ready? Right. And so when I think about, to your point about what influence allows you to do, it allows you to actually affect change, positive change, right? The ability to change systems and infrastructures that have been disproportionately inequitable, right? That we know there have been disproportionate impacts and inequities and inequalities that have existed. And so the ability to be able to do that and to change the course of the future of others who come through these doors, who come into the public relations marketing industry, for me is incredible. And if I didn't have the art of and know the art of persuasion to then influence, I wouldn't be in a position to do it. And so it can have great effect, right, for yourself as an individual in terms of career growth opportunities, greater exposure, new experiences, but also for what you can do for others and how you can change the course of someone's career experience and even their life. So for me, it's huge. It's beyond yourself. And again, that goes back to me for what I see as the difference between manipulation and persuasion. It is not only about you, but it is also about, in the process, what you're doing to affect others in a positive way. So I think it's huge, your ability to affect, when I hear mentees talk about, I remember seeing you do such and such, like what that deposits within them, those seeds that are planted that will grow years, decades down the line. We have such an awesome opportunity and responsibility, right, in terms of influence. We're seeing it now when we look on social media, right, and we listen to things like the influence that pop culture has and that other institutions have on us. So it can be used for great good or great evil, but it's so very powerful, and it's all in the hands that it's within and how you use it.
Mm-hmm. This is so good. Sandra, if something has come to mind, and we're gonna ask one more question and get straight to your questions. So please keep them coming in the chat. And I know that Jacqueline and Angelina have been looking out for them for me. So we'll just ask one more question. But what would you say, Sandra?
Right.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was having so many different thoughts, and I was like, which way do I go first?
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely shortcut economy, right? All of the apps that we love is because it allows us to get things done quickly. Influence and persuasion also impacts processes in that it allows us to get things done quickly. So rather than sending out a whole pitch proposal, you can make a call. You can send an email, you can send a text, because you have established reputation. But what I would also say is that in the spirit of transferable skills, if anyone here is a parent, you are the most persuasive people ever. If you are a parent of toddlers and small children, you're constantly negotiating and using persuasive words to get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So let's apply that to the workforce. How can we use words and our presence to get things done and to get things done quickly? That is really what it is in the most simple way. But getting things done is what influence and persuasion does. And we all need that to get things done in the workforce, but also personally and professionally.
I love how you have drawn those lines, those common threads between who we are and what we do in our personal lives, and how that is totally applicable and relate it to who we are and what we do in our professional lives. So many common threads there. Before we go to our chat and it's blowing up. I love it. Keep the conversation going. I love how you're talking to each other as well, and encouraging each other. So this is really good. We're going to come and it's all going to be about your questions. I just want to do some real quick fire. These are some things that we can add to the list. We've talked about building trust. We've talked about being consistent. I want to make it even more practical and tangible for those of us who really want to walk away activating our networks, being more influential. And so I'm just going to name a couple of these, and I'm sure they're going to generate some thoughts for you too. You can either elaborate on the couple that I name, or you can add to the list. I would encourage those of us who are endeavoring to be more influential and persuasive to use more we language than I language. That when you are talking about whatever it is that you are pitching or whatever ideas, make sure that you are including you in the pack, and you show that you are invested, that you would become an expert in a niche. And I know, we think that to be the master of all trades is what we're looking for at an organization, but to find an expertise and to say, this is what I bring to the table, and then continually offer that niche and that expertise to different people, helping them, that whole idea of investment. And then really being flexible, because I think when we think about talking to, sharing with folks, we may hear differing ideas, and it really takes us listening, being adaptable and flexible on the cuff in the moment, to make sure that we are not stuck, we don't freeze. And I know that takes practice and being prepared as much as possible. But when you hear something that allows you to pivot, see it as an invitation to switch and pivot instead of remaining stuck where you are, because I think the middle name of every company is change, and we all have to, in order to excel and be influential, we have to be willing to be flexible. Those are just, I have others, but top of mind for me. What do you think? And do others really, come to mind as it relates to how we can practically jump in to be more influential or persuasive?
I just want to piggyback on your point about the adaptability factor, and that if you're in a conversation and the approach you're taking isn't working, being agile enough to pivot and to try another route. So that does require you being sort of attentive and sort of quick. And even sometimes you may say, that's a good point, let me come back to you, right? We call those bridges, right, in communication. So bridging, pivoting, if that's not working, okay, that's a great point. I want to follow up with you in a week and come back to you with some other thoughts, right? If you don't have that response there, but being able to do that, to be adaptable and to pivot on the spot, on the fly, is key. And I mentioned the point earlier about knowing the person, but also knowing actually who you need to influence is important. I think oftentimes we're utilizing time and energy, and valuable time and energy, on individuals that maybe aren't the people that are the influencers that need to be influenced. And so being clear about, again, the levers that you need to approach that person on, what they're most interested in, but also being clear about who you need to focus your energy on around whatever specific need, idea, or program that you're discussing.
So good. So good. Any
Yes,
thoughts?
I would say you mentioned expertise. It was Angelina who actually said this, and it's always stuck with me. There are riches in the niches, right? Have a niche. Have something you brand yourself as being good at, being great, exceptional at. And then create value. Don't just add value, but create value. And that speaks to what Trish spoke to in terms of who are you influencing? Where are you creating value, and to whom are you creating value? And is it where it's going to move the needle, like my pillow says? It must move the needle personally and professionally always. So yes, have an expertise, an intentional expertise, and you can build that and you can brand it.
So good. So good. And all of this takes courage, but that's why you're here. You are here to build that muscle. We learn and we practice in community together in safe spaces. And that's what Angelina has created for us in here, to really just talk about how we activate this when we get off of this call. And so we want to get to your questions. I see one from Denise, and I'm hoping that there are others that maybe I missed or that are coming. Denise said the chat is everything, and she said, I've experienced challenges with communicating the new vision to those that think they have more pull than they actually do. If it's the new directive, how many times do I have to persuade you to get on board and not keep pushing back? And I see you now, Denise. Thank you so much for this question. Let's see if you need to elaborate. Let's see if they have any thoughts already. Either of you have any thoughts already?
I would actually love to hear from Denise if she could. Can we hear from her to get a little bit more intel about the situation?
I would love that.
Sure. I'm sorry. I'm in a position where I have to kind of have my mask on, so I'll take it off for just a second. But I recently, we had a new directive at work around D&I, and in communicating it to those who have been heading up councils, PD, and that sort of thing, they really wanted to stick to the old formula. They didn't want to move forward with what was new. And so while I tried to persuade them on, seeing the benefits of our new initiatives, they were very resistant, to the point where they started campaigning and going to people in the C-suite. That group is trying to change things. We've done so much good work, but it really just wasn't what was needed anymore. And so my thing is, how many times do I need to explain the why behind a decision and explain the benefits and try to set you up with all of the cool things so that you keep visibility in an organization, when you really don't have the power to say no? And it really caused friction within our organization, because you had executives chiming in and being pulled in to save this person or this group, and they weren't even aware of what they were stepping into, this landmine of, oh, this is a directive, from the president. And no, we can't just save her or say her work is good and keep what she's been doing. So I was like, how many times do I have to do that? And, is it just that my approach was wrong, or maybe I was hurting someone's ego? I don't know, but it wasn't just me. Even those above me had had several conversations with this group, and they just were not budging. It was sort of a standoff, and they really don't have the power to stand off.
So I think I've been in a similar situation. It sounds like it might be about this group where you mentioned a she, maybe an individual. It sounds like there may be some personal sort of maybe protection or something happening there, or coddling even of this individual or this group, maybe just to sort of save face, or to try to have peace that they think will be maintained if they don't move forward with the directive as outlined. So I think there are a couple of things. One is try to get to, as much as you can. I wouldn't exhaust a lot, but get to the root of the disagreement. Is it about it's going to change their job? It's going to create greater accountability for them? Or is it going to be more responsibility? Like, what is the root of this group's disagreement? I think will be helpful for you to understand the best approach to take with them. In addition to that, outlining why it's not working, why what they're currently doing is not working in the form of data, whether it's qualitative, quantitative. This is why we're changing. It's not just because we think it's great. We woke up one morning and said, let's change everything. But what we've done may have worked to get us where we are, but it's not going to help to get us to the future, to help us progress further. And so I think highlighting the why behind the change and what it will help produce and the benefit it will have to the entire enterprise could also be very helpful. Because you can't argue with the data, right? If you're like, hey, here's why this worked to this degree, but this is why it's not going to work to move us further in our DEI journey, to get us from point B to Z.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. That's
right.
so good.
I just want to add, So, Trinace, I think you said this earlier. One thing we can all expect within organizations is change. We've been through a lot of change in the last 2 to 3 years. I'm starting to lose track. And change is challenging. And change requires work. And usually in the workplace, we don't want to work, right? The irony. But what I would say is, in your situation, small wins may actually be the way for you to get to big impact. And it might also require some collective buy-in, because it seems like ideas were introduced, and ego is the enemy. We want to feel like our ideas are great, and how come I didn't have a say in this idea? So if you have the ability to, everything that Trish said, get to the root of it. What is the root of the tension? What is your biggest concern? And how can we remedy for that so we can move forward? What I would also say is that, especially as task forces, councils, all of these things are being formed and developed. There's a lot of politics, but what's most important is that you get collective buy-in, so everyone feels like it's their great idea and they have a part in this big, great thing that is happening and is being launched, the organization, that will impact everyone. So the other thing is, just like they're tapping in the C-suite and senior leadership, I would say you may also need advocates and sponsors who can help convey that message too, and can also add strength to your message. But that's a different kind of influence.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Trish. You getting ready to say?
Because I got excited because you're talking about the messengers, because in fact, the messengers are just as important as the message, right? And so to your point, adding voices to the chorus that can help to echo what you're trying to influence is critically important. So you're not a lone voice in the wilderness, but you have others who are echoing that. And then after a while, it may not be immediately, the dissenters or these outliers will want to get in line, because they're going to want to be a part of the momentum that you're building and the success that you're producing.
So good. I'm hopeful that helped me, Denise. So I'm hopeful that helped you. And I know we have to turn it over in just a couple of minutes. We had a couple of questions to come in, and I wanted to give Kaneen, I believe it is, and you can let me know if I have mispronounced it. She wanted a little added clarification on the difference between adding value and creating value, which I think is really important. So many people in the chat resonated with them. So either of you, Sandra, I know that was something that you shared. How does one create value? I think adding value may be a little clear, but creating value, what does that look like?
Yeah, I would. So sometimes at work, again, we don't want to work, but what are areas of opportunity? And I would also say everything is strategic. Everything is a strategic move. So your presence at work every day is a strategic move. What are the areas of opportunity that can make big impact? And that can be creating value. What is something that just does not exist? Something so small, but that can create big impact. Look for those pockets of opportunities. Adding value could be you're helping to move a project faster, but maybe you're also bringing the idea of what that project is, right? Instead of becoming a part of it.
That's so good. So good. So looking at where the gaps are and finding some solutions, and it's usually the practitioners, not maybe on the very top level, but someone who's actually doing the work, who has some of those solutions about what can be done to fill those gaps. So good. I think we are right on our time, and I see one more question. I'm gonna let, okay, I see a nod, so I got a good nod, because I think this is a really great one that maybe you all have a very quick response to. How do you take ownership of the conversation and be professional at the same time? Because, we will be perceived as some other adjectives when we assert ourselves. We become seen as aggressive versus just being assertive and ambitious and vocal. And so how do we do that if the person, many times male, is not letting us get a word in? Any quick fire answers there, Trish or Sandra?
Yeah, you keep interjecting. You persist.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you persist. I mean, we often have been in those situations, all of us, where you have a man that's like mansplaining, trying to like explain what you said, or over talking you, or taking ownership for what you said and of what your thoughts were that were offered, but persisting. And so if it's in, and if they try to say, oh yeah, Bob, that was great, like I said, right, referring back to the point you made, and assuming sort of ownership for that, but also interjecting, right? And that comes with that courage that we talked about before. Sometimes it's not comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Say, hey, by the way, like, and continue to insert yourself. This is, I saw someone put in the chat, I think it was Angelina, about sort of, this is where it's also helpful to have allies in the room, because I often look around the room to see when that's happening and pause to say, let me hear from such and such, right? She's been trying to share, or I know she's been trying to interject, right? So create that space for others as well, so that they can share their voice and make their comments. So I would say continue to persist. And maybe if it continues, if it's a colleague you're working with on a day-to-day basis and they're habitual offenders, to then actually maybe have a conversation offline.
Mm-hmm.
Right? To really get to the root of it. They may or may not recognize they're doing it. Who knows? But to call it to their attention if it's something that you're encountering on a daily basis.
So good. Sandra, before, in case you have final words, the book was, and I'm finding it now. I was almost there. Someone wanted the name of the book again. I'm hoping that you all can just put it in the chat. What got you here will not get you there. That's what it was. So in case that's helpful to someone, what got you here will not get you there.
Mm-hmm.
This has been absolutely amazing. I know we could go on because I have other questions. I would love to elaborate, but I know we get to do this often. So I will just say we hope, Sandra and I hope to see you in the C-Suite Coach portal, interested in some more conversation. And thank you so much, Trish. I am just so honored to have you here and look forward to connecting with you. And I turn it back over to Angelina. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Trish. Thank you to Sandra, and thank you so much to Trish. Each of what you shared was so incredibly valuable. First of all, also thank you to everyone who shared vulnerably in the chat. Two things that I definitely will be walking away with coming from Trish is thinking a lot about this being a muscle that we just have to keep working on and exercising and leveraging preparation for. And definitely putting this on a t-shirt from Sandra, that we should not wear ourselves out selling in places that aren't buying. But truthfully, there, I have a page of notes. So I'm glad that I was able to turn it over to Dr. Trish to lead this excellent conversation. We hope to see you back at our next C-Suite Coach chat. Jackie will drop in the date in the chat. And if you're on our newsletter, you will get communications about that. As always, we want to let you know that you have the opportunity for a free 15-minute consultation with an executive coach on our website. Please share this resource with folks in your team that you think need coaching. And we will see you back next month for our May C-Suite Coach chat. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.